Welcome, and thank you for joining us at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston this morning. I'm Kelley Brown, and I'm the President of the Board of Directors. Please remember our annual meeting is this afternoon at 1:00 p.m. at the Museum District. Members will be voting for those who will represent us on the board and for members of the nominating committee. This morning, Dr. Bossen's sermon focuses on Juneteenth, the commemoration of the announcement which proclaimed freedom from slavery in Texas. For those of you who are new to our congregation or our online services, we invite you to continue watching after the benediction to hear more about the living tradition that is Unitarian Universalism. We now invite you to hear our call to worship.
Our call to worship this morning comes from Martha Valentine. Spirit of life all around us, you have gathered us together in a swirl of healing wind. Take this newfound apprehension, an unwelcomed shawl heavy upon our shoulders, and make of it a comforter, soft and warm and trusting, in which we might rest our weary souls. Each day we awaken, may our first thought and vision be the peace in the eyes of our sisters, brothers, and cousins, who also see the peace in mine. And from this gaze into each other, may the peace of our hearts heal one another. Hearing these words, come, let us worship together.
Celebremos compartiendo nuestras vidas, encendiendo esta luz.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole, keep the circle whole, keep the circle whole.
Please join me in the spirit that some call prayer and others name meditation. Open yourself to the wonders and mysteries of the world. Open yourself to compassion and empathy. Take one breath. Take another. Center yourself. Our prayer this morning is a simple one. In honor of the coming of Juneteenth, and of the wisdom found in earth-centered traditions, we pray, which is to say we invoke and respect all of the ancestors across all of the generations and lands who struggled for the greater vision that there be freedom and self-determination for all, that we remember we are all residents on the earth, all connected to each other, to the flowers and the trees, the water, the sky, the fire, the dirt, and all the ground of being. May we remember these teachings in all that we encounter. They are ever present if we can just open ourselves to them. So that it might be so, I invite the congregation absent in body, but present in spirit, to say, Amen. We pause now to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. We lift up Patty Ryan, who was involved in an auto accident while in Houston earlier this week. She is hospitalized, but is less hurt than first feared. We hold her in our healing thoughts and send support to her and her son Hunter. We mourn the death of the Reverend John Marsh, longtime colleague of both myself and the Reverend Dr. Dan King. Reverend Marsh died this past week after a long illness. He served the First Unitarian Universalist Society, where both Dan King and I were affiliated with the congregation. I invite you to bring to mind or say the name of those you wish to have held in the loving embrace of this community. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. We pause in awe and wonder of the mystery that is life. In the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
Good morning. I'm Phil Richardson, a member of our church's Community Projects team. We live out our UU values by conducting outreach projects to strengthen our community. This morning's offering will help fund Rebuilding Together Houston, an organization that members of our church have long supported. Its mission is repairing homes, revitalizing communities, and rebuilding lives. Its vision is safe homes not only for individual people, but also for the community. For almost 40 years, Rebuilding Together Houston has enlisted community volunteers and licensed contractors to repair homes of low-income seniors, U.S. military veterans, and homeowners with disabilities, and working families impacted by natural disasters like Harvey, and more recently, last winter's big freeze. All repairs are provided at no cost to homeowners. Most of this volunteer program was put on hold in 2020 due to the pandemic. However, our crew regrouped this spring and repaired the home of Mrs. Jackson, who was very pleased with the results. Other Rebuilding Together Houston crews rebuilt another 24 homes this spring. Join us again this fall for our next project. Our regular Sunday morning offering collection invites all of us to weave a tapestry of love and action. Today we ask you to give generously to provide building materials for our Rebuilding Together Houston crew. The offering will now be gratefully given and received.
Our first reading is two stanzas by Mariahdessa Ekere Tallie. I want to walk barefoot in a place where barefoot has no name, in a place where soul on earth is natural, a place where toes in soil is common as true love, laughter, and birth. I want to walk barefoot in cities without streets, where admiration is a deep silence, and conversations are replaced by the eloquence of eyes. Barefoot in a place where excuses are not enforced in law books, where there is no law, only that which is right.
Our second reading is from Freedom Dreams by Robin D.G. Kelley. What shall we build on the ashes of a nightmare? We don't need another hall of finance, wealth, and exclusivity, no more symbols of class, power, and privilege. We don't need another gargantuan modern-day mill where some working people slave over mops and vacuum cleaners in the wee hours of the morning, and others over computers and fax machines way past sundown. Yes, jobs are valuable and necessary in a world where everything, even food, shelter, and clothing, is a commodity. But now is the time to think like poets, to envision and make visible a new society, a peaceful, cooperative, loving world without poverty and oppression, limited only by our imaginations.
Yemaya asesu, asesu yemaya. Yemaya asesu, asesu yemaya. Yemaya olodo, olodo yemaya. Yemaya olodo, olodo yemaya. Yemaya asesu, asesu yemaya. Yemaya asesu, asesu yemaya. Yemaya olodo, olodo yemaya. Yemaya yemaya olodo yemaya. Olodo yemaya. Yemaya asesu, yemaya asesu, asesu yemaya. Asesu yemaya. Yemaya asesu, yemaya asesu, asesu yemaya. Asesu yemaya. Yemaya olodo yemaya. Yemaya olodo yemaya. Olodo yemaya. Olodo yemaya. Yemaya olodo yemaya. Olodo yemaya. Yemaya olodo.
Here we are. This is it. The last pre-recorded sermon that I will be preaching. Next time, I'll be coming to you live. That will certainly be a different dynamic, a conversation with a bit of call and response, I hope, rather than the interchange between screen and viewer. I do not think I can really put into words how much I am looking forward to being with you again. While this is my last pre-recorded service, I must note that it is not the last one that First Houston will be offering. That will be next Sunday when Reverend Scott leads our final entirely online service. I hope you'll join us then for what I'm sure will be a fine concluding note to what has been a labor of love. Services that were meant to stimulate the eyes as well as the ears throughout this difficult period. At this moment of transition, it seems appropriate to pause and offer a simple thank you to everyone who has supported First Houston over these challenging 15 months. Throughout the pandemic, we've been able to offer what I think of as a rather remarkable ministry. Our social justice and social service programs have had an impressive impact. Our online programs have been viewed by over 8,000 households. Almost 20 new members joined our congregation. And most importantly, we have managed to more or less stay together as a congregation. While many members of our Thoreau Richmond campus are leaving to launch the exciting project of forming a new church, we have been able to keep in touch with almost everyone who was a member of First Houston prior to the pandemic. Your generosity has also meant that we've not had to lay off a single staff person at a time when unemployment has reached record levels. So thank you for all the support you have given First Houston over these past months. It's made a huge difference for our friends and members, and has empowered us to make a difference in the world. And for all of that, I am truly appreciative. At this moment of transition, I would like to reassure those of you who have found us online that we will be ending our pre-recorded services. We will not be stopping with our online programs. Those will continue. We will live stream our Sunday morning services at 11:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. Central. The sermons will be posted to our YouTube channel. Some of our small groups will meet over Zoom. Some will meet in person, and some will meet in a hybrid model, offering options for both. At this moment of transition, I would also like to extend to you an invitation. Sunday, June 13th at 1 p.m., shortly after this video is posted, we will be having our first gathering as a religious community since March of 2020. The annual meeting will be held right here in the sanctuary. I hope you will attend. We will be electing new members of the Board of Directors and the Nominating Committee. Board President Kelley Brown will provide an overview of our accomplishments for the past year, and I'll be describing our plans for the next 12 months of ministry. Transitions. With all of that life of the congregation throat clearing out of the way, I shift us to the subject of today's service, Juneteenth. Juneteenth falls on a Saturday this year. There are Juneteenth events being held throughout the city, both this weekend and next. And that gave us the choice of either holding our Juneteenth service this Sunday or next. Now, I cannot remember exactly why we decided to talk about it this Sunday rather than a week from today. I think it had something to do with encouraging you to check out some of the many in-person and online celebrations that will be held in the next few days. I'm planning on attending at least a couple. On Wednesday, the Yates Museum is hosting a virtual panel on the sacred music tradition featuring two long-standing friends of the congregation, Dr. Jason Obey and Dr. Anthony Pinn. Then on Saturday, the Freedmen's Town Farmers Market and a host of other organizations are having a big neighborhood-wide celebration in the Fourth Ward. There's going to be a chili cook-off, vendors selling fresh produce and artisan goods, bouncy houses, and a whole bunch of activities. My lady friend is one of the organizers, so I plan to be there for most of the day. Freedmen's Town is an excellent place to pivot our sermon to. I suspect that a lot of you know it well. It's the oldest free African-American neighborhood in Texas. Built by previously enslaved people following the Civil War, it's sometimes called the Mother Ward. It is the starting point for the city's African-American community. For many years, First Houston has partnered with the Yates Museum to restore and preserve some of the neighborhood's historic houses. Even with the pandemic, folks from the community projects team have been diligently working on two of the structures, the Nixon House and the Lewis House. Volunteers have painted, done woodwork, replaced roofs, and even built new foundations. The objective is not to create new buildings, of course. It is to restore a semblance of what was at as a monument to the achievements of free people in the decades following the defeat of the Confederacy and the end of chattel slavery. It's a laudable undertaking and will, I suspect, not just benefit the Yates Museum or Freedmen's Town, but all of us. Black history and true freedom, which I might suggest here is a combination of collective and individual self-determination, is something that should be celebrated by everyone. The buildings of Freedmen's Town are not really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the bricks. Are you familiar with them? On first appearance, they are ordinary red clay, smooth to the touch, worn down by generations of traffic, sun, wind, and water. They do not seem all that remarkable. Yet they are probably the most famous and most controversial part of the neighborhood. Famous because they are a symbol of resistance, achievement, and recovery. The bricks tell the story of how the community built itself up. They tell the story of how white supremacy was challenged and how people of African descent created a prosperous community and economy. The story that is repeatedly told is that the bricks were paid for, made by, and laid by residents of Freedmen's Town. You will encounter the story if you talk with someone in the neighborhood. Journalists mention it in radio and television pieces and in newspaper articles. It's there if you dig through academic articles to read about Houston's black past. The bricks still pave a handful of streets. Some are neatly laid out, tightly packed with barely a gap for water to seep between them. Others are more of a mess, the victims of intentional neglect by the city and, in several instances, willful vandalism by developers seeking to erase the neighborhood's rich culture and history. They are not all the same. They are from different brickyards and were made in different eras. All of them, however, can be taken as a symbol of the way in which the community's autonomy and self-reliance functioned in the first years of freedom. The bricks are said to exist because the city refused to surface the neighborhood's streets. I've been told that as the houses were being built and the community began to generate real wealth, its residents approached the city and asked that it begin to provide resources in the form of paved roads to support its development. City Hall apparently told them that the city of Houston had no intention of supporting Freedmen's Town through tax revenues. And so the people who lived there went door to door and collected subscription fees to pay for the red bricks to build sidewalks and thoroughfares. In many places, the bricks were not laid out in the kind of rows that you might encounter in other brick streets throughout the country. Instead of being placed line after line, they were put down in patterns that came from West Africa, from the places where many of the ancestors of the residents of Freedmen's Town had lived before they were kidnapped, transported across the ocean, and made to work in the forced labor camps euphemistically called plantations. I love the idea that bricks are laid in West African patterns. This month in worship, we are considering the sixth source of Unitarian Universalism. In written form, that source is rendered spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. The bricks nod to the wisdom of earth-centered traditions and the ability to recover and celebrate those traditions in spite of their attempted erasure by centuries of white supremacists, slave masters, colonizers, and various varieties of evangelists. They connect the neighborhood to its ancestors. They connect it to the ancestors who laid the bricks and the ancestors who lived many generations before. I do not know what religion the ancestors of the people who built Freedmen's Town was. It might have been Yoruba. It could have been Akan or Dogon or Vudan. Probably ancestors of the builders of Freedmen's Town practiced a variety of religions. They were brought in chains to Texas from all over Africa. Their use of West African patterns was their way of saying that even after the brutality of slavery, they were still connected to, still responsible to their ancestors. In many West African religions, the land does not belong to the living. It belongs to the ancestors. You only become an owner of the land once you have passed on, once your bones have mingled with earthly dust. The bricks of Freedmen's Town represent a similar statement. They are a reminder that the community is present because of the struggles and sacrifices and victories of its ancestors. They are a palpable, touchable tribute to Juneteenth, to the end of chattel slavery and the beginning of communal freedom. What remarkable bricks! They incarnate the survival of culture in defiance of the brutality of racial capitalism. They represent the community's self-determination and economic autonomy in the face of a city that did not want a neighborhood or the place who lived in, or the people who lived in it to survive. They are artifacts that honor the past, are found in the present, and point to the future. Many earth-centered religions want us to engage in practices that do the same. I detect such sentiments in Mariahdessa Ekere Tallie's poetic words. She honors the past, savors the present, and pushes us to imagine a different future. She calls us to a place where barefoot has no name, a place that she was seemingly rooted to in the past and will perhaps return to in the future. In the meantime, there are toes in soil, true love, laughter, birth, admiration, and deep silence. The bricks and the poem have an important connection to the teaching of many earth-centered traditions. In such traditions, we find the wisdom over and over again in a multitude of ways that there is nowhere else but here. When we become ancestors, we become connected to this land. While we are here, we are dependent on it. And so we should honor, respect, maintain this land, this world, for it is the only one we have. The fact that the bricks can communicate such earth-centered wisdom is unfortunately why they are controversial. They are controversial because they clarify who built the community. And that controversy has meant that a few years ago, the city dug up almost 4,000 of them. A contractor hired to install and repair the neighborhood's sewage and water lines uprooted and took many of the bricks off-site. They were disposed of, and according to the Chronicle, some were even used in fancy houses in River Oaks. This provoked community outrage. It inspired community organizing. The bricks became a symbol of how the community was trying to survive amid an onslaught of gentrification and displacement that has been going on since at least the late 1930s. I anticipate that many of you know this story. After all, First Houston has been working on historic preservation in the Fourth Ward neighborhood for many years. Some of you, I do not doubt, were involved in the struggle to get the bricks returned. This Sunday before Juneteenth, I invite you, no matter who you are, to consider the lessons that the bricks might teach us. They are many. Whoever we are connected to our ancestors. Whoever we are, we will leave a legacy for our descendants, be it in tangible red clay or in another form. Whoever we are, as far as we know, there is really nowhere else but here. The bricks also teach, as Juneteenth does itself, that the struggle against white supremacy and to build community have not ended. Voting rights are under assault. Many of the white supremacists and others involved in the January 6th insurrection, including Texas's own Senator Ted Cruz, have not been held accountable for their actions. Developers still want to erase Freedmen's Town. More than 150 years after the end of slavery, 100 years after the Tulsa race riots and the destruction of black communities across the country, there still has not been meaningful collective reparations. There is still much work to be done. And that is where I leave this sermon on this Sunday before Juneteenth, not with a reassuring conclusion, not on a triumphant note, not even with a prayer, but with a word: there is much work to be done. There is much work to be done to preserve communities, to dismantle white supremacy, to celebrate the earth-centered wisdom that there is nowhere else but here. There is much work to be done. As we regather in person as a religious community in the coming weeks and months, I look forward to doing some of that work with you. Amen, and blessed be.
We are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. Siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahamba, hamba, siahamba, hamba, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahamba, hamba, siahamba, hamba, siahamba kukanyen kwenkos. We are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. Siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahamba, hamba, siahamba, hamba, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos, siahamba, hamba, siahamba, hamba, siahambe kukanyen kwenkos. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We end our service, but the service we are called to do does not end. It is always time to bind up the broken, to reclaim that which has been lost, to honor those who have come before, to remember that there is nowhere else but here. May we recall those lessons, and may they lead us to action wherever we travel and wherever we sink our roots. Amen, and blessed be.
Please join us in thanking staff member Tawana Grice. Music director Mark Vogel was joined by the guest composer Kim Yan and a special collaborative performance by International Voices Houston, Congregation Beth Israel's Shirenu Choir, and the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church Choir. For those of you who may be new to this congregation or the online services, let us say a few words about Unitarian Universalism. Unitarian Universalism is a faith where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. As Unitarian Universalists, we join together on a journey that honors everywhere we've been before. Together we create a force more powerful than one person or one belief system. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. Rather than a creed, we share a covenant based on a set of 7 principles. These include the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the knowledge that we are part of an interconnected web of all existence that calls us to honor the earth and all creatures. Thank you for being with us today.
There is a lot going on this week. Here are just a few highlights. Join us today at 1 p.m. at the Museum District for the church's annual meeting. Members will be voting for those who will represent us on the board and for members of the nominating committee. We will be socially distancing and observing safety protocols. After the 10:30 service, we have two opportunities to chat, the coffee half hour at 11:30 and the discussion circle at noon. In the latter, Lynn will be asking, what actions could we take that could encourage and heal some divisions in our culture? Thursday at 7, you can pick and strum along with a string band, and young adults have a great place for support, sharing, and conversation Friday at 3. There are many groups meeting online. Go to firstuuhouston.org to check them all out. Many of the topics for upcoming discussion groups are on our website, firstuuhouston.org/online-group-meetings. Visit there for more details and to sign up. And remember, all times shown are Central Daylight Time.